Hello everyone, welcome back. It's our 67th session, October-November 2021. Let's get started. This is what I heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying in a Jita grove near the city of Sarvati. With him, there was community of 1,250 venerable monks and devoted disciples. One day before dawn, the Buddha clothed himself and along with his disciple took up his alms bowls and entered the city to beg for food door to door as was his custom. After he had returned to Eden, he put away his bowl and cloak, bathed his feet, and then sat with his leg crossed and body upright upon the seat arranged for him. He began mindfully fixing his attention in front of him, while many monks approached the Buddha and, showing great reverence, seated themselves around him. After a time, a most venerable monk named Subhuti, who was sitting in the congregation, rose from his seat. He uncovered his right shoulder, placed his right knee on the ground, and as he joined his palms together, he respectfully bowed and then addressed the Buddha. Most Honored One, it is truly majestic how much knowledge and wisdom your monks and disciples has been given through your most inspired teachings. It is remarkable that you look after our welfare so selfishly and so completely. Most Honored One, I have a question to ask you. If sons and daughters of good families wants to develop the highest, most fulfilled and awakened mind, if they wish to attain the highest perfect wisdom, what should they do to help quit their drifting minds and help subdue their craving thoughts? The Buddha then replied, So it is as you say, Subhuti. Monks and disciple has been favored with the highest favor by the Buddha. The monks and disciple have been instructed with the highest instruction by the Buddha. The Buddha is constantly mindful of the welfare of his follower. Listen carefully with your full attention, and I'll speak to your question. If son and daughter of a good family wants to develop the highest, the most fulfilled and awakened mind, if they wish to attain the highest perfect wisdom, and quit their drifting mind while subduing their craving thoughts, when they should follow that I am about to say to you, those who follow what I am about to say here will be about to subdue their discriminative thoughts and craving desires. It is possible to attain perfect tranquility and clarity of mind by absorbing and dwelling on the teaching I am about to give. Then the Buddha addressed the assembly. All living beings, were born from eggs, from the womb, from moisture, or spontaneously, whether they have form or do not have form, whether they are aware or unaware, whether they are not aware or not unaware, all living beings will eventually be led by me to the final nirvana, the final ending of the cycle of birth and death. And when this unfathomable infinite number of living beings have been all liberated, in truth not even a single being has actually been liberated. Why Subhuti? Because if a disciple still clings to the arbitrary illusions of forms or phenomena such as an ego, a personality, a self, a separate person, or a universal self existing eternally, then that person is not an authentic disciple. Furthermore, Subhuti, in the practice of compassion and charity, a disciple should be detached. That is to say, he should practice compassion and charity without regards to appearances, without regard to form, without regard to sound, smell, taste, touch, and any quality of any kind. Subhuti, this is how the disciple should practice compassion and clarity. Why? Because practicing compassion and charity without attachment is the way to reaching the highest perfect wisdom. It is the way to become a living Buddha. Subhuti, do you think that you can measure all the space in the eastern heaven? No, most honored one. One cannot possibly measure all of the space in the eastern heaven. Subhuti, can space in all western, southern, and northern heaven, both above and below, be measured? No, most honored one. One cannot possibly measure all the space in the western, southern, and northern heavens. Well, Subhuti, the same is true of the merit of the disciple who practices compassion and charity without any attachment to appearances, without cherishing any idea of form. It is possible to measure the merit they will acquire. Subhuti, my disciples should let their mind absorb and dwell in the teaching I have just given. Subhuti, what do you think? Can the Buddha be recognized by means of his bodily form? No, most honored one. The Buddha cannot be recognized by means of his bodily form. Why? Because when the Buddha speaks of bodily form, it is not a real body, but an illusion. The Buddha then spoke to Subhuti. All that has a form is elusive and unreal. When you see that all forms are elusive and unreal, then you will begin to perceive your true nature, a Buddha. Subhuti respectfully asked the Buddha, Most honored one, in the future, if a person hears this teaching, even if it is only a phrase or a sentence, is it possible for that person to have a true faith and understanding of enlightenment awaken in their mind? Without a doubt, Subhuti, even 500 years after the enlightenment of this Buddha, there will be someone who are virtuous and wise, and while practicing compassion and charity, they will believe in words and praise of this sutra and will awaken their mind purely. After they come to hear these teachings, they will be inspired with belief. This is because when some people hear these words, they will have understood intuitively that these words are the truth. But you must also remember, Subhuti, that such persons have long ago planted the seed of goodness and merit that leads to this realization. They have planted the seed of good deeds and charity not simply before the Buddhist temple or 2 temples of 5, but before hundreds of thousands of Buddha and temples. So when a person who hears the words and praises of the sutra is ready for it to happen, a pure faith and clarity can awaken there within their minds. Subhuti, any person who awakens faith upon hearing the words or phrases of the sutra will accumulate countless blessing and merit. How do I know this? Because this person must have discarded all arbitrary notions of the existence of a personal self, or of a people, or of a universal self. Otherwise, their mind would still grasp after such relative conceptions. Furthermore, these people must have already discarded all arbitrary notions of the non-existence of personal self, the other, or universal self. However, otherwise their mind would still be grasping at such notions. Therefore, anyone who seeks total enlightenment should discard not only all conception of their own selfhood, of other self, or of universal self, but they should also discard all notions of the non-existence of such concepts. When the Buddha explains the teaching using such concepts and ideas, people should remember the unreality of all such concepts and ideas. They should recall that in teaching spiritual truth, the Buddha always uses this concept and idea in a way that a raft is used to cross the river. Once the river has been crossed over, the raft is no more use and should be discarded. These arbitrary concepts and ideas about spiritual things need to be explained to us as we seek to attain enlightenment. However, ultimately, this arbitrary conception can be discarded. Think, Subhuti, isn't it even more obvious that we should also give up our conception of non-existent things? Then the Buddha asked Subhuti, what do you think, Subhuti? Has the Buddha arrived the highest, most fulfilled, most awakened and enlightened mind? Does the Buddha teach any teaching? Subhuti replied, As far as I have understood the Buddha's teaching, there is no independently existing objects of mind called the highest, most fulfilled and awakened enlightenment mind, nor is there any independently existing teaching that the Buddha teaches. Why? Because the teaching that the Buddha has realized and spoken of cannot be conceived of as a separate, independent thing, and therefore cannot be described. The truth in them is uncontainable and inexpressible. It neither is nor is it not. What does this mean? What this means is that Buddha and disciples are not enlightened by a set of method of teaching, but by an internally intuitive process which is spontaneous and is a part of their own inner nature. Let me ask you, Subhuti, if a person filled over 10,000 galaxies with the seventh treasure for the purpose of compassion and charity, and giving alms, would this person not gain great merits and spread much happiness? Yes, most honored one. This person would gain great merits and spread much happiness, even though in truth this person does not have a separate existence to which merit could occur. Why? Because this person's merit is characterized with the quality of not being merit. The Buddha continued, then suppose another person understood only 4 lines of this sutra, but nevertheless took it upon themselves to explain this line to someone else. This person's merit would be even greater than the person's. Why? Because all the Buddha and all teachings and values of the highest, most fulfilled, and most awakened minds arise from the teaching in this sutra. And yet, even as I speak, Subhuti, I must take back my words as soon as they are uttered, for there are no Buddha and there are no teaching. Buddha then asked, what do you think, Subhuti? Does one who has entered the stream which flows to enlightenment say, I have been entered that stream? No, Buddha, Subhuti replied. A true disciple entering the stream would not think of themselves as a separate person that could be entering anything. Only the disciple who does not differentiate themselves from others, who has no regards for name, space, sound, odor, taste, touch, or any quality can truly be called a disciple who has entered the stream. Buddha continued, does a disciple who is subject to only one more rebirth say to himself, I am entitled to honors and rewards of one to be reborn? No, blessed one, once to be reborn is only a name, there is no passing away, or coming into existence. Only who realizes this can really be called the disciple. Subhuti, does a venerable one who will never more be reborn as a mortal say to himself, I am enlightened to the honor and rewards of the non-returner? No, perfectly enlightened one. A non-returner is merely a name. There is actually no one returning and no one not returning. Tell me, Subhuti, does the Buddha say to himself, I have attained perfect enlightenment? No, blessed one, there is no such thing as perfect enlightenment to obtain. If a perfectly enlightened Buddha were to say to himself, I am enlightened, he would be admitting there is individual person, a separate self, and personality, and would therefore not be a perfectly enlightened Buddha. Subhuti then said, Most honored one, you have said that I, Subhuti, excel amongst the disciple in knowing the bliss of enlightenment, in being perfectly content in exclusion, and in being free from all passions. Yet I do not yet to say myself that I am so, for if I have ever thought of myself as such, then it would not be true that I escape ego delusion. I know that in truth there is no Subhuti, and therefore Subhuti abide nowhere, that he neither knows nor does he not know bliss, and that he is neither free from enslaved by his passions. The Buddha then continued, what do you think, Subhuti? When I was in the previous life with Dipankara Buddha, did I receive any definite teaching or attain any degree of self-control, whereby I later become a Buddha? No, honorable one. When you were a disciple of Dipankara Buddha, in truth you received no definite teaching, nor did you attain any definite degree of self-control. Subhuti, know also that if any Buddha would say, I will create a paradise, he would speak falsely. Why? Because a paradise cannot be created, nor can it not be created. A disciple should develop a mind which is nowhere dependent upon sight, sound, smells, taste, sensory sensation, or any mental conception. A disciple should develop a mind which does not rely on anything. Therefore, Subhuti, the minds of all disciples should be purified of all thoughts that relate to seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching, and discriminating. They should use their minds spontaneously and naturally without being constrained by preconceived notion arising from the senses. Suppose, Subhuti, a man had an enormous body. Would the sense of personal existence he had also be enormous? Yes, indeed, Buddha. Subhuti answered, his sense of personal existence would be enormous, but the Buddha has taught that personal existence is just a name, for it is in fact there neither existence nor non-existence, so it only has the name personal existence. Subhuti, if there were as many Ganges River as the number of grains of sand in the Ganges, would you say that the number of grains of sand in all those Ganges River would be very many? Subhuti answered, very many indeed, most honored one. If the number of Ganges River were that large, how much more so would be the number of grains of sand in those Ganges rivers. Subhuti, I will declare truth to you. If a good man or a good woman filled over 10,000 galaxies of worlds with the seven treasure for each grains of sand in all those great Ganges rivers and gave it away for the purpose of compassion, charity, and giving alms, would this man or woman not gain great merits and spread much happiness? Subhuti replied, very much so, most honored one. Subhuti, if after studying and observing even a single stanza of this sutra, another person were to explain it to others, the happiness and merit that would result from its virtuous act would be far greater. Furthermore, Subhuti, if any person in any place were to teach even 4 lines of this sutra, the place where they taught it would become sacred ground and would be received by all kinds of beings. How much more sacred would be the place become if the person then studied and observed the whole sutra? Subhuti, you should know that any person who does that would surely attain something rare and profound. Wherever the sutra is honored and revered, there is sacred sight ensuring the presence of the Buddha or one of the Buddha's most venerable disciples. Subhuti, said the Buddha, by what name shall we know this sutra so that it can be honored and studied? The Buddha replied, this sutra shall be known as the amount that's cut through the illusion. By this name it shall be revered and studied and observed. What does this name mean? It means that when the Buddha's named it, he did not have in mind any definite or arbitrary conception, and so men named it. The sutra is hard and sharp, like a diamond that will cut away old arbitrary conceptions and bring one to other shore of enlightenment. What do you think, Subhuti? Has the Buddha taught any definite teaching in this sutra? No, Buddha has not taught any definite teaching in the sutra. What do you think, Subhuti? Are there many disciples of dust in this vast universe? Subhuti replied, yes, many, most honored one. Subhuti, when the Buddha speaks of particles of dust, it does not mean I am thinking of any definite and arbitrary thought. I am merely using these words as a figure of speech. They are not real, only illusion. It is just the same with the words universe. This words does not assert any definite or arbitrary idea. I am only using the words as words. Subhuti, what do you think? Can the Buddha be perceived by means of his 32 physical characteristics? No, most honored one. The Buddha cannot be perceived by his 32 physical characteristics. Why? Because the Buddha teaches that they are not real, but are merely called 32 physical characteristics. Subhuti, if a good and faithful person, whether male or female, has for the sake of compassion and charity been sacrificing their life and generation upon generation, for as many generations as the grain of the sand in 3,000 universes, and another follower has been studying and observing even a single section of the sutra and explained it to others, that person's blessing and merits would be far greater. At the time, after listening to this sutra, Subhuti had understood its profound meaning and was moved to tears. He said, what a rare and precious thing it is that you should deliver such a deeply profound teaching. Since the day I attained the eyes of understanding, thanks to the guidance of the Buddha, I have never before heard teaching so deep and wonderful as this. Most honored one, if someone hears this sutra and has pure and clear confidence in it, they will have a profound insight into the truth. Having perceived that profound insight, the person will realize the rarest kind of virtue. Most honored one, that insight into the truth is essentially not insight into the truth, but it's not what the Buddha called insight into the truth. Most honored one, having listened to this sutra, I am able to receive and retain it with faith and understanding. This is not difficult for me, but in ages to come, in the last 500 years, if there is a person who hears the sutra who receive and retain it with faith and understanding, then the person will be rare one, a person of most remarkable achievement. Such a person will be able to awaken pure faith because they have ceased to cherish any arbitrary notions of their selfhood, other self, living beings, or universal self. Why? Because if they continue to hold on to arbitrary conception as to their own selfhood, they will be holding onto something that is non-existent. It is the same with all arbitrary conceptions of other selves, living beings, or universal self. These are all expressions of non-existent things. Buddhas are Buddhas because they have been able to discard all arbitrary conceptions of forms and phenomena. They have transcended all perceptions and have penetrated the illusions of all form. The Buddha said, "So it is, Subhuti, most wonderful blessed will be those beings who, on hearing the sutra, will not tremble nor be frightened or terrified in any way." And why? The Buddha has taught the sutra as the highest perfection, and what the Buddha teaches is the highest perfection. That's also innumerable blessed Buddha to teach. Therefore, it is called highest perfection. Subhuti, when I talk about practice of transcendent patience, I do not hold on to arbitrary conceptions about phenomena of patience. I merely refer to it as the practice of transcendent patience. And why is that? Because when the thousands of lifetimes ago the Prince of Kalinga severed the flesh from my limbs and my body, I had no perceptions of self, being, soul, or universal self. If I had cherished any of these arbitrary notions at the time my limbs were being torn away, I would have fallen into anger and hatred. I also remember, Subhuti, that during my 500 previous life, I have used my life and afterlife to practice patience and to look upon my life humbly, as though I were a saint called upon a suffer humility. Even when my mind was free of arbitrary conception of the phenomena of myself, a being, a soul, or a universal self. Therefore, Subhuti, disciples should leave behind all distincts of the phenomena and awaken the thought of attainment of supreme enlightenment. Disciples should do this by not allowing their mind to depend upon ideas evoked by the world of the senses, by not allowing their minds to depend on their ideas, still by sounds, odor, flavor, sensory, touch, or any other quality. The disciple's mind should be kept independent of any thought that arises within. If the disciple mind depend upon it, everything in the sensory realm, it will have no solid foundation in any reality. This is why Buddha teaches that the mind of disciples should not accept an appearance of things as basis when exercising charity. Subhuti, as disciples practice compassion and charity for the welfare of all living beings, they should do it without relying on appearances and without attachment, just as the Buddha declares that form is not form, so he also declared that all living beings are in fact not living beings. Subhuti, if on the one hand a son or daughter of a good family gives up his or her life in the morning, as many as there are grains of sand in the Ganges River, as an act of generosity, and gives as many again in the afternoon, and as many again in the evening, and continue doing so for countless ages, and if the other one, on the other hand, another person listen to the sutra with complete confidence and without contention, that person's happiness will be far greater. But the happiness of the one who writes the sutra down, receive, recite, and explain to it others cannot be compared, it is so great. Subhuti, we can summarize by saying that merits and virtue of this sutra is unconceivable, incalculable, and boundless. The Buddha has declared this teaching for the benefit of infinite initiates on the path of enlightenment. He has declared it for the benefits of the initiates on the path of nirvana. If there is someone capable of receiving, practicing, recites, and sharing the sutra with others, the Buddha will know the person, and he or she will receive immeasurable, incalculable, and boundless merits and virtue. Such a person is known to be carrying the supreme enlightenment attached by the Buddha. Why? Subhuti, if a person is satisfied with lesser teaching than those I present here, If he or she is still caught up in the idea of a self, a person, a living being, or universal self, then the person would not be able to listen to, receive, recite, or explain the sutra to others. Sutra, whether this sutra shall be observed, studied, and explained, that place will become sacred ground to which countless spiritual advance being will bring offering. Such place, however humbly they may be, will be revered as though they were famous temples, and countless pilgrims will come there to worship. Such a place is Sharon's and should be venerated with formal ceremonies and offering the flowers and incense. That is the power of the sutra. Purgations of Buddha, bad karma. Furthermore, Subhuti, if a good man or a good woman who accept, uphold, read, or recite the sutra is disdained and slandered, if they are despised or insulted, it means that prior life they have committed evil acts, and as a result are now suffering the fruits of their actions. When their prior lives, evil acts have finally been dissolved and distinguished, he or she will attain the supreme clarity of most fulfilled and awakened mind. Subhuti, in ancient time, before I met Devankara Buddha, I had made offerings to, and I had been attendant of 64,000 million Buddhas. If someone is able to receive, recite, study, and practice sutra in later, more distant age, then the happiness and merit brought about this spiritual act would be hundreds of thousands of times greater than that which I brought about my service to the Buddha in an ancient time. In fact, such happiness and merit cannot be conceived or compared with anything even mathematically. If I were to explain all this in details now, some people might become suspicious and deliberating, and their mind may be even disoriented and confused. Subhuti, you should know that the meaning of the sutra is beyond the conception and discussion. Likewise, the fruit resulting from receiving and practicing this sutra is beyond the conception and discussion. At that time, the Venerable Subhuti then asked Buddha, World-honored one, may I ask you a question again? If son or daughter of a good family wants to develop the highest, most fulfilled and awakened mind, if they wish to attain the highest perfect wisdom, what should they do to help their quit their drifting minds and mastering their thinking? The Buddha replied, Subhuti, a good son or daughter who wants to rise to give the highest, most fulfilled and awakened mind must create this resolved attitude of mind. I must help to lead all beings to the shore of awakening. But after this being have been liberated in truth, I know that not even a single being has been liberated. Why is it so? If a disciple cherishes the idea of self, person, a living beings or universal self, then the person is not an authentic disciple. Why? Because in fact there is no independently existing objects of mind called the highest, most fulfilled and awakened mind. What do you think, Subhuti? In ancient time, when the Buddha was living with the Dipankara Buddha, did he attain anything called the highest, most fulfilled and awakened mind? No, most honored one. According to what I understood from the teaching of the Buddha, there is no attaining of anything called the highest, most fulfilled and awakened mind. The Buddha said, You are correct, Subhuti. In fact, there does not exist any called highest, most fulfilled and awakened mind the Buddha attained, because if there had been any such thing, the Pankar Buddha would not have predicted of me. In the future you will come to be Buddha, known as the most honored one. This prediction was made because there is in fact nothing to be attained. Someone who be mistaken to say that the Buddha has attained the highest, most fulfilled and awakened mind, because there is no such thing as highest, most fulfilled and awakened mind to be attained. Subhuti, a comparison can be made with this idea of a large human body. Would you understand to mean if I spoke of a large human body? I would understand that Buddha was speaking of a large human body not as an arbitrary conception of its being, but as a series of words itself. Words. I would understand that the words carried merely a imaginary meaning. When the Buddha speaks of a large human, he uses words as words. Subhuti, it is just the same when the disciples speak about liberating numberless sentient beings. If they have in mind any arbitrary conceptions of sentient beings or of definite and numbers, then they are unworthy of being called a disciple. Subhuti, my teaching, revealed that even such a thing as is called disciple is non-existent. Furthermore, there is no really for a disciple to be liberated. A true disciple knows that there is no such thing as self, a person, or living beings, or universal self. A true disciple knows that all things are devoid of selfhood, devoid of any separate individuality. To make this teaching even more empathetic, Buddha continued, if a disciple were to speak follows, I have to create a serene and beautiful Buddha field, then the person is not truly a disciple. Why? What the Buddha calls a serene and beautiful Buddhahood is not, in fact, a serene and beautiful Buddha field, and that is why it is called serene and beautiful Buddha field. Subhuti, only a disciple who is wholly devoid of any conceptions of separate selfhood is worthy of being called disciple. The Buddha then asks Subhuti, what do you think? Does the Buddha have human eye? Subhuti replied, yes, he has human eyes. Does he have the eye of enlightenment? Of course, the Buddha has the eyes of enlightenment, otherwise he would not be the Buddha. Does the Buddha have the eyes of transcendent intelligence? Yes, the Buddha has the eyes of transcendent intelligence. Does the Buddha have the eyes of spiritual intuition? Yes, plus one. The Buddha has the eyes of spiritual intuition. Does the Buddha have the eyes of love and compassion for all sentient beings? Buddha agreed and said, you love all sentient life. What do you think, Subhuti? When I referred to the grain of sand in the river Ganges, did I assert that there were truly grains of sand? No, blessed one. You only spoke of them as a grain of sand, Subhuti. If there were as many Ganges river as there are grains of sand in the river's Ganges, and if there were as many Buddha land as there are grains of sand in all the innumerable rivers, would this Buddha land be considered numerous? Very numerous indeed. Subhuti, I know the mind of every sentient being in all the host of universes, regardless of any modes of thoughts, conceptions, and tendencies. For any modes, conceptions, and tendency of thoughts are not mind, and yet they are called mind. Why? It is impossible to retain a past thought, to seize a future thought, or even to hold on to a present thought. The Buddha continued, what do you think, Subhuti, if a follower were to give away enough treasure to fill 3,000 universes, would a great blessing and merits incur to him or her? Subhuti replied, Honor one, such a follower require considerable blessing and merits. Buddha said, Subhuti, if such blessing had any substantiality, if it were anything other than a figure of speech, the most honored one would not have used the words blessing and merits. Subhuti, what do you think? Would one look for Buddha in his perfect physical body? No, perfectly enlightened one. One should not look for Buddha in his perfect physical body. Why? The Buddha has said that the perfect physical body is not the perfect physical body. Therefore, it is called perfect physical body. Subhuti, what do you think? Should one look for Buddha in all his perfect appearance? No, most honored one. One should not look for Buddha in all his perfect appearances. Why? The Buddha has said perfect appearances are not perfect appearances. Therefore, they are called perfect appearances. Subhuti, do not maintain that the Buddha has this thought. I have spoken spiritual truth. Do not think that way. Why? If someone says the Buddha has spoken spiritual truth, he slanders the Buddha due to his inability to understand what the Buddha teaches. Subhuti, as to teaching truth, no truth can be spoken. Therefore, it is called speaking truth. At that time, Subhuti, the wise elder, addressed the Buddha. Most honored one, will there be living beings in the future who believed in the sutra? When they hear it, the Buddha said, the living beings to whom you refer are neither living beings nor not living beings. Why, Subhuti? All the different kinds of living beings the Buddha speaks of are not living beings, but they are referred to as living beings. Subhuti again asked, Blessed One, when you attained complete enlightenment, did you feel in your mind that nothing had been acquired? The Buddha replied, That is exactly, Subhuti. When I attained the total enlightenment, I feel like I did not feel as the mind feels any arbitrary conceptions of spiritual truth, not even the slightest. Even the words total enlightenment are merely words. They are used merely as figure of speech. Furthermore, Subhuti, when I had attained in total enlightenment in some same as what other have attained, it is differentiated, regarded neither as a high state nor a low state. It is wholly independent of any definite or arbitrary conceptions of an individual self, other selves, living beings, or universal self. Subhuti, when someone is selflessly charitable, they should also practice being ethical by remembering that there is no distinction between oneself and a selfhood of others. Thus, one practices charity by giving not only gifts, but also through kindness and sympathy. Practice kindness and charity without attachment, and you can fully become enlightened. Subhuti, what I just said about kindness does not mean that when someone is being charitable, they should not hold on to arbitrary conceptions about kindness. For kindness is, after all, only a word, and charity needs to be spontaneous and selfless, done without regards of appearances. Then the Buddha continued. Subhuti, if a person collects treasure as high as 3,000 of the highest mountain and gave them all to others, their merit would be less than what would occur to any another person who simply observed and studied the sutra, and out of kindness explained it to others. The later person would accumulated hundreds of thousands times of merits, hundreds of thousands of millions of times of the merit. There is no considerable comparison. Subhuti, do not say the Buddha has the idea, I will lead all sentient beings to nirvana. Do not think that way, Subhuti. Why? In truth, there is not a single being for the Buddha to lead to enlightenment. If the Buddha were to think there was, he would be caught in the idea of self, a person, a living being, or a universal self. Subhuti, what the Buddha called the self essentially has no self in the way that ordinary person think there is a self. Subhuti, the Buddha does not regard anyone as an ordinary person. That is why he can speak of them as ordinary person. Then the Buddha inquired the Subhuti, what do you think, Subhuti? Is it possible to recognize the Buddha by the 32 physical mark? Subhuti replied, yes, Monor One, the Buddha may thus be recognized. Subhuti, if they were true, then Chakravanti, the mythological king who also had 32 monks, would be called a Buddha. Then Subhuti realizing his error and said, most honored one, now I realize that the Buddha cannot be recognized merely by his 32 physical marks of excellence. The Buddha then said, should only one looking at an image or likeness of the Buddha claim to know the Buddha and worship him, that person would be mistaken, not knowing the true Buddha. However, Subhuti, if you think the Buddha realizes the highest, most fulfilled and awakened mind, and does not need to have all the marks, you are mistaken. Subhuti, do not think in that way. Do not think when one arises give highest, most fulfilled and awakened mind, one needs to see all objects of mind as non-existence, cut off from life. Please do not think in that way. One who gives rise to the highest, most fulfilled, and awakened mind does not contend that all objects of mind are non-existence and cut off from life. That is not what I say. The Buddha continued, Subhuti, if someone gives treasure equal to the number of sands on the shores of the Ganges River, and if another, having realized the egolessness of all beings, thereby understands selflessness, the latter would be more blessed than the one who practices external charity. Why? Because great principles do not bring blessing and merits as a private possession, as something to be gained. Subhuti inquired to the Buddha, "What do you mean? Great disciples do not see blessing and merits as a private possession?" The Buddha replied, "Because those blessings and merits have not been sought after by those great disciples. They do not see them as private possession, but they see them as the compassion possessing of all beings." The Buddha said, "Subhuti, if any person were to say that the Buddha is now coming or going, or sitting up or lying down, they would not have understood the principle I have been teaching." Why? Because while the expression Buddha means he who have thus come, thus gone, the true Buddha is never coming from anywhere or going anywhere. The name Buddha is merely an expression, a figure of speech. The Buddha resumed, "Subhuti, if any person, either man or woman, were to take in 3,000 galaxies and grind them into microscopic powder and blow into space, what do you think? Does this powder have any individual existence?" Subhuti replied, "Yes. Yes, as a microscopic powder blown into space, it might be said to have a relative existence. But as you use words, it has no existence. The words are used only as figure of speech. Otherwise, the words would imply a belief in the existence of matter as an independent and self-existing thing, which is not. Furthermore, when the most honored one refers to 3,000 galaxies, he could only do so as a figure of speech. Why? Because if the 3,000 galaxies really existed, their only reality could consist in their cosmic unity. Whether as microscopic powder or as a galaxies, what does it matter? Only in the sense of the cosmic unity of ultimate being can be Buddha rightfully referred to it. The Buddha was very pleased with this reply and said, "Subhuti, although ordinary people have always grasped after the arbitrary conceptions of matter and galaxies, the concept has no true basis. It is an illusion of mortal mind. Even when it is referred to as cosmic unity, it is unthinkable and unknowable." The Buddha continued, "If any person were to say that the Buddha in his teaching has constantly referred to himself, to other self, to living beings, or to universal self, what do you think? Would that person have understood my meaning?" Subhuti replied, "No, blessed one. That person would have not understood the meaning of your teaching, for when you refer to those teachings, you are not referring to any actual existence. You only use the words figure as a figure of speech, a symbol. Only in that sense can words be used, for conceptions, ideas, limited truth, and spiritual truth have no more reality than have more matter or phenomena." Then the Buddha made his meaning even more emphatic by saying, "Subhuti, when people begin their practice of seeking to attaining total enlightenment, they ought to see, to perceive, to know, to understand, and to realize that all things are all spiritual truth, are no things, and therefore they ought not to conceive within their mind any arbitrary conceptions whatsoever." Buddha continued, "Subhuti, if anyone gave to the Buddha an immeasurable quantity of a seven treasure, sufficient to fill the whole universe, and if another person, whether a man or woman in seeking to attain complete enlightenment, were to earnestly and faithfully observe and study even a single section of this sutra and explain it to others, the accumulated blessing and merits of that latter person would be far greater. Subhuti, how can one explain this sutra to others without being holding in mind any arbitrary conceptions of forms or phenomena or spiritual truth? It only can be done, Subhuti, by speaking the mind in perfect tranquility and free from any attachment to appearances. So I say to you, this is how to contemplate our conditioned existence in this fleeting world, like a tiny drop of dew or a bubbling flood in the stream, like a flash of light in a summer cloud, or a flickering lamp, an illusion, a phantom, or a dream. So is all conditioned existence to be seen. Thus spoke Buddha. Thanks everyone for joining as always. I hope you have a lovely day as you are, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks everyone.